again for another Polterhike in the Godley-ish area. As I said in the last video, we're last one for this general area, but I think it's a good one. It's a bit of a difference from all the other types of ghosts. Not that they've all been standard ghosts. We've had a dog, haven't we? And a dog and a bog girt. But this one is something completely different. Still a ghost, but it is a ghost of a lorry, a Phantom Lorry. One that's said to haunt this road, Mottram Road, Mottram New Road. There's an old road, and that's on the other side of Godley Green. Godley Green, as we know from my previous stories, has been a bit of a hotspot, hasn't it, for all types of ghosts, phantoms, doggy ones, white lady ones. Well, this one borders the edge of Godley Green, almost as a kind of paranormal border patrol officer, maybe keeping the spooks into Godley Green, between the Mottram Roads, Mottram New Road and Mottram Old Road on the other side. Now this road, up here you might see cars passing by above me, runs the length of Hyde across Godley and towards Mottram, passing Hattersley on the way. It's called the A57 officially. Might know it as the Snake Pass further down once you get towards the Peak District. But this point here, just this stretch between Mottram and Godley, it was in the 1920s and 30s a bit of an accident black spot. There was lots of unexplained occurrences where vehicles were getting into serious accidents on this road. It's only a small stretch of the A57, and the amount of accidents that were occurring on here was above average, shall we say, for the area. And with lots of people saying that the strange lights that they would see here were otherworldly or spectral in nature. These lights would pass by the other road users or fade into the distance or disappear suddenly as they were coming straight on towards the other person driving the other way. Very strange, very spooky. Now, looking back at the articles from the time that made it to the newspaper, there were said to be 16 major accidents or incidents on this part of Mottram Road just between 1927 and 1930. That's quite a lot for what is essentially a quite wide, open stretch of road, and not much in the way of bends or anything to obstruct your visibility. Now, sometimes it can be prone to a bit of fog because we're in this clough just by the road and there's a river running by, you might be able to hear. But other than that, the road is a decent stretch of road. So when the police did come and investigate the site of the incident, there was never a satisfying explanation. The police would have to write most of these events off as unexplained because quite often there was no sign of any other vehicle, there were no skid marks, there was no other lorries involved. The victim of these incidents would often say there were lights coming towards them, quite often on the other side of the road, coming straight at them, and they would take an evasive action to avoid them, get themselves in an accident, but there would never be an impact with the other vehicle. So the police had nothing else to go on other than this person's word, and no good reason why the person would leave the road, crash into a wall or come into the forest here and smash into a tree. As much as I'd like to regale you with 16 unique stories of the Phantom Lorry running people off the road and all their individual accounts, unfortunately, they don't exist. Just the reports that there are these 16 incidents between 1927 and 30. But there is one, luckily, one fully fleshed out story we can use. A full account of what happened to two men driving home this way one night. As usual, let's move somewhere else and I'll tell you the story. Now, in the late 1920s to 30, this was a mostly empty, dark stretch of road at night. There wasn't very much here between Godley, that way, and Mottram, that way. Apart from the odd cottage scattered around further back in the Hattersley farmsteads at that time. there was only really said to be one lamp next to a junction, which could be either the one there for what's now Hattersley, or the one further down the road known as Four Ways. And apart from that sign and that lamp, the only building really worth mentioning was that one there. And that was the New Inn pub, a 500-year-old pub in 1929-30. And it was pretty much the only thing on this road between Godley and Mottram in an otherwise, at night again, dark, empty space. So it's 100 years old on top of that now, so it's a 600-year-old pub. Or it was a 600-year-old pub until it was converted into a house and apartments. So 600 minus 15, 585-ish years. That's maths. And at some point around 1930, the owner of the pub, a Mr. William Grattan, was interviewed by the Daily Express newspaper to find out if he knew anything about this mysterious uptick in incidents that had been happening the last few years on this relatively small stretch of road. And William Grattan told them that for around 6 years or so, he and his wife were regularly disturbed by spooky noises around the pub at night, especially around the back. It got to the point where Mr. Grattan said to the newspaper that he bought himself a police-trained guard dog to help keep away these intruders who he thought were potentially trying to rob them or hurt them. And apparently he had some success at first with the dog, a few times coming back with patches of people's trousers that it torn away, chasing them away. And even one time, a full pair of overalls, which I imagine must have come from an easy-to-identify chap who was scarpering for the hill somewhere. Must have been an awkward day at work the next day, going and explaining where your overalls have gone. After a while, these noises started to take on a repetitive nature. They would hear what sounded like a heavily built man approaching from the back of the pub, and they would hear the heavy footsteps moving towards the back door, but then seemingly hesitate before turning around and leaving again. And then when Mr. Grattan would let out his prize beast, his prize attack beast, to go and chase off this intruder that he would regularly hear at his door, the dog would come running straight back in, whimpering and scared. Not injured, but completely afraid, and he would not go back outside again. So maybe something out there was more terrifying than his police-trained attack dog. Maybe something bigger than it, or scary than it. And if you've seen one of my other stories, maybe a bigger dog. A big yellow phantom dog from Godley Green. Sometime later, William Grattan started to notice that every time he would hear these sounds outside the back of his house that terrified his dog, there would be some kind of vehicle accident outside the front of his pub. It got to the point where it happened so often that he could predict it was going to happen, and he would keep a first aid kit ready to go at his pub because he knew he would be dealing with an injured person outside, or someone would come running into the pub needing help. Some of the examples that William gave of strange occurrences were the vehicles parked around outside the pub would move themselves to new locations on their own. People would come back out to the cars and they would have moved further down the road somewhere. And even one time when a lorry was said to have come loose on a steep junction just nearby to the pub, and there is one just there, which is Hattersley now, and it leads right down onto Mottram Road. This lorry is said to have come loose at the top of the hill and barreled down the hill and smashed into the wall at the bottom, just down here. Now, once I heard that story, I had an idea. Stay with me. Now, what if that lorry, having barreled down the hillside, come loose somehow, handbrake failure or something, smashed into the wall, smithereens, right off. Now, that lorry had some unfinished business. Maybe it was carrying some necessary expensive goods on the back. He never got to deliver them. And having not finished its business, went on to haunt this road, driving up and down in the dark, running other people off the road, trying to get to its final destination. How's that for an origin story? Maybe that's where it all began. And with all the spooky goings on around the pub, maybe you could say spectral interference was the reason why the lorry came loose. Or maybe it was just a failed handbrake. But at least the cars moving themselves around, that's very strange, isn't it? So maybe the beginning of all that paranormal activity began with that pub, with the New Inn. Maybe the New Inn itself, having died as a pub, now haunts those houses. Maybe the current inhabitants wake up every night to the sound of darts being thrown and pints being pulled. The glasses clinking together and the leery lads shouting before they kicked out at closing time. I don't know. But we're here for ghost lorries, aren't we? So let's move somewhere else. one report that we do have states that there was a man called Albert Collinson, and he was riding his motorbike down Mottram Road from the Godley end towards Mottram. And on the back of his motorcycle, he had his cousin, Charles Ridgway. And he said he was driving at a fairly sedate 15 miles per hour, but it had been raining. And he was coming from that Godley direction, down the road towards Mottram, passing the New Inn. And just before he got to this junction that it doesn't exist anymore, it's a big roundabout which is currently being expanded even further. It used to be a junction called Four Ways, apparently, I was told. Imaginatively, because probably it had 4 ways on it. The A57 went straight across. If you were to turn right off Mottram Road, you would end up going into what's now Hattersley. And it was still called Hattersley then, but it was pretty much this. Now you might have even heard of it. It's a huge housing estate, the biggest in the country at one point when it was built. But it was once just farmhouses and very few of those, and fields. And then the other way was just a quarry, Harropedge, which is just here in front of me. But driving this way down towards Mottram, he said he'd passed the New Inn and he was just coming up to the quarry entrance on Four Ways junction, when suddenly he could see a red light and what looked like a large vehicle backing out of a side street towards him. Now, with it being so close to him and wet, he was forced to take evasive manoeuvres, and he swerved to avoid what he thought was a lorry reversing out in front of him. But as we know, motorbikes are not the most manoeuvrable on a penny. They don't turn instantly. And with it being wet, he lost control of the motorcycle. And this being about 1930, people weren't big on protective wear, were they? And it wasn't very advanced anyway. So unfortunately, he came off the motorcycle and they were both quite injured. They were both found unconscious and taken to hospital, where Albert was found to have a fractured skull. But unfortunately, his cousin Charles actually died at hospital from his injuries. Now, at the inquest into the accident, the coroner, Mr. Stuart Roger, was so confused by this constant series of accidents in the area, and he took a special interest in this one. He even invited the jury at the inquest to come and see the site at midnight for where the accident happened, hoping to catch a glimpse of some of the ongoing paranormal activity in the area, to see what was causing these accidents in such an abundance. But disappointingly, I think mostly for Mr. Stuart Roger himself, because he seemed to genuinely think there was something to these claims of this haunted section of road. Him and the jury, having had a good look at the road there was no signs of any paranormal activity or a phantom HGV, haunting ghost vehicle. Hey, come on. I deserve praise for that, surely. Wordsmith. Mr. Roger said that he looked at the stretch of road where the accident occurred, and although there was an opening in the road just at the base of Harropedge for the entrance to the quarry, there was no further opening between there and the site of the accident 88 yards further back up Mottram Road. So there was nowhere where the lorry could have pulled out from, or at least there wasn't any more. And further to that, Mr. Roger added, I came to the conclusion that there was some mysterious influence over that section of the road. And my theory was supported by a local resident who declared that there was a motor vehicle accident of some kind there every 2 months. The accidents appear to occur on a stretch of perfectly good straight road with an excellent surface and no obstructions. The police provided me with a list of 18 accidents for which there was no reasonable explanation for a number of them. I believe there are other stretches of road in the country where a series of mysterious accidents have occurred. They may be worthy of investigation from a psychical point of view. Sounds like a pre-FBI Fox Mulder, doesn't it? I don't know what our British variation of him would be from the time. Was the MI5 around then? Something alike? Badger, Merriweather, Jones III? Atrocious. Poor effort. And so for closing at the inquest, Mr. Roger asked Mr. Albert Collinson one more time, are you sure it was a lorry that you saw pulling in front of you on the road on that night? And Albert said, yes, it was. And to that, Mr. Roger replied, well then, if that's the case, it must have been some kind of Phantom Lorry. It must have. Okay, so you might have noticed some time's passed since the last bit. Might be a couple of hours later, or days. I did realise later on it might be an idea to come and see the area down from the moor there on the actual junction of where the accident was said to have happened. Now this is the spot which was once 4-lane ends, or 4 ways as some people call it. And it's now, as you can see, a lorry load of massive roundabout. An even busier junction than it was back then when it was 4 ways. Now they're actually expanding it further for the Mottram bypass, so it's going to be, I don't know, 5 or 6 ways, 7 ways, whatever it is now. If you look on Google Maps, you can actually see, if you look from above, you can still see the old junction in the middle of the roundabout, which is interesting. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The whole point was that it's said to be between this junction, the old 4 ways, and 88 yards back down Mottram Road. Between there was where this junction was said to be. So I just thought maybe we could step out 88 yards and see if we can see roughly where something could have occurred. Or not. Okay, I'll start as close to this junction as I can now. I'll count out 88 extraordinarily large steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 57, 58, oh what's that, 59. It looks like there's no lorries allowed between 7 at night and 7 in the morning, so we might be out of luck, guys. Let's see what we can do. Maybe ghost lorries don't abide by the same rules. What are we up to? I've lost count now, 60, I think, 60, 61, 62, 86, 87, 88. So this is where the coroner said this is where the nearest junction was, or the nearest point where you could imagine a lorry could have pulled out of in front of them. And funnily enough, actually, look, we do have a road and a few houses which I don't think existed at the time. From what I've looked at on maps anyway, I don't think Melling Court Drive. Yep, I'm pretty sure that didn't exist at the time. It's a busy junction. But what's the likelihood that he then managed to lose control and skid for the entire distance of this road? It'd have been a lot of swerving, wouldn't it? Maybe there'd be some very obvious skid marks to get up there. You'd have some skid marks if you were swerving for this long. So now walking back up here, getting to roughly halfway back between the 88 yards, just a short distance from the old entrance to the quarry. They found the bike roughly 40 something yards, 46 yards from the junction. So it'd be roughly somewhere in the middle here. So as you can see, it is a fairly busy road now, and it was the main route back then. But also, as you can see, it is wide open and very straight. There's not a lot to surprise you. So there isn't a good reason for you to come off, even if you've been drinking, I suppose. Maybe there was something to his story. Maybe there really was a surprise spectre of a lorry reversing out in front of him. And there was a snippet of a comment that I did see that said there was as many as 1 accident per month, I believe it was, for around 8 years. 1 a month at that time, and there's nothing else on the road. I mean, maybe that's how they got into an accident, because there was nothing to look out for. So when you did come across another vehicle, it took you by surprise because you just were, I don't know, because you were just looking out at the stars. I'll wrap it up there. Or in fact, I'll give it back to myself back in time to wrap it up there on the hill. Cheers, see you there. Can't see anything here. It's worth a look though, wasn't it, for midnight? It's always going to be worth a try. See something supernatural. It'd be amazing. Nope. Nothing. And with that closing statement from Albert Collington and Mr. Roger, that brings me to the end of the ghost stories of Godley Green and the surrounding areas. I know this one was cutting it fine with coming from Godley Green to Mottram and Hattersley, but it was on Mottram Road and it does border right on the edge of Godley Green, and I can't help but believe that if it was such a paranormal hotspot, this road would have cut into what was once barely a track, and with the advances in civilization pushing further and further into the green spaces. Maybe they push back a little bit every now and again. And they push back with a lorry. It's a great story. It's one of the first ones I ever heard in this area, and I love it. It's one that I've wanted to cover right from the beginning. I think even before the boggart. With me living close by to this, it was one of the first things that captured my interest in the local folklore. And it doesn't go back as far as some of the others. 1930s. It's literally not a million years away. It's about 100 years ago if you round up. And I think we've covered the gamut quite well there, haven't we? We've gone from boggarts, boggart being a term that was used for a poltergeist or a ghost of some kind. We moved our way through ghostly hounds, a giant yellow devil dog that tears along the lanes, terrorising people. Back up to the more commonplace white lady spirits, which we discovered there's maybe 3 of those, not just the one. And then lastly, a ghost lorry, the Phantom Lorry of Mottram Road. I think that's an excellent way to wind up. There's not many of them around, is there? And trust me, I did my research. I tried to find ghost lorries, tried to find anything that wasn't somebody picking up a ghost hitchhiker off the road. There's not many, not in this country anyway. I hope these 4 stories from the Godley area have brought you entertainment and hopefully got you interested in some of the local folklore. Maybe even got you to look into your own local folklore in your area. And if you did, and you discovered anything good, let me know again in the comments. I'd love to hear that kind of thing. I'm sure there's plenty I've not covered in this area still, so feel free to let me know about those. And don't think for a minute I'm completely finished with the area. I've got plenty more stories on my list yet to come. I'll be back out towards the Peak District. I'll be out leaning towards Manchester a little bit, back in Tameside and Stockport. I've got a lot still to come. And if you haven't already, you should probably like and subscribe to my channel. And then you won't miss out on any of my future videos. So come back soon for another one of my Polterhikes. And I'll see you then. Have a good one. And my theory was supported by a resident who declared that there was a motor vehicle accident of some kind there every 2 months. These planes, man. Come on, planes! I'll start again. And that plane's gone. Thistle. Anybody else?